Hello, welcome to Building Renaissance Leaders podcast. I'm Victor Vogel. I host the show. This is kind of a special podcast. I'm doing it out of my normal time, my normal day. It's really an educational podcast, but I'm thinking it might be beneficial to a lot of people. And the title of it is Why is Leadership Fucked Up? And I know that's a harsh term, but in this case, I think it applies. I think it applies. I look around and Uh, I see world events happening where two men are controlling the killing and slaughtering of kids and uh, innocent bystanders and people in a war zone environment. Uh, we've got, uh, that's happening in the Mid East. And really, you think about it, that really boils down to two leaders deciding that, hey, let's give in a little bit, figure out a way to solve this a different way. Uh, has a lot to do with Putin trying to take over Ukraine. Uh, and You think about others, you think about China, and you think about and its leadership, and you got a maniac in North Korea who's trying to develop missiles as fast as he can to deliver nuclear weapons. Who knows? You have many of the people in the East, the theocracy run by. But the reality is most of these are men that I'm mentioning. And that's one of the things we're going to touch on in the next couple months on the podcast is the role women can play and maybe changing the paradigm of leadership. Uh, but, all these are men. If we come home, we got an ex president about to go to trial for criminal charges, federal criminal charges. He's already been convicted of assault on a woman in New York. His business has been convicted of fraud, and the CFO was sent to jail just today again for 5 months for perjuring himself. What's going on here? This is the leadership we're looking at. I mean, in 2016, uh, Trump was saying, "Hey, I'll guide you. I'll guide you into a new world. I'll get rid of the swamp, guide you into a new world." Oh my God, what happened there? And that's just 34 counts of the 94 counts. He's still got a lot of trials to go through yet, even yeah, down the road, whatever happens. So the fact is, leadership in general is not very good right now. It's not appreciated. In addition to just our government, just within the business world, you got billionaires who control the vast majority of the businesses making money, and some of those are kind of radical in nature. You take Elon Musk. He didn't like the way Twitter was going, so he thought he would buy it. Well, Twitter is kind of like a place where people go to get their news. You hope it's objective and unbiased and open, and it gets locked down. You got a billionaire controlling it, and if he doesn't like you, you don't get to be on this, you don't get to be on that. On top of that, he lost so many people out of that company, and now he's looking. And the latest article I read on his leadership was he doesn't know whether the company is going to be viable or not. That's Twitter we're talking about. Then I mean, and you can look at Facebook and Google and all the other major internet social media empires out there that are controlling information that people get. They're not bound by any regulations like mass media outlets are, like CBS, NBC, ABC, those, and I guess most of the cable networks, although you wonder sometimes. But uh, who's the leader on a major cable network that would hire somebody who was part of trying to overthrow the government as part of their newscast team? So that all of these things are happening. These are observable, concrete behaviors happening out there. You have corporations that uh, are now fighting unions that once before probably wouldn't have even thought about it. And now we also have the whole dilemma of uh, business leaders saying, "Hey, you need to come back on site and go to work," and that's a constant tug of war going on today. That's our leadership. That's what's happening, and it's not just me. I was watching the Daily Show, the YouTube on one of Jon Stewart's daily shows, and uh, Christine Amanpour, she's a international reporter, uh, and she's been a reporter internationally, mostly in the Mid East area, way back in the 80s, and when Israel was up in an uproar with somebody else, and you had the two wars going on over there. She was in the middle of all of that, and they were talking about Israel and Hamas and the tragedy that was going on and why, and trying to figure things out. And right in the middle of that, she came out with a statement that just smacked me right in the face. It just basically reinforced everything I've been looking at, but you'll see how that works in just a minute. But I thought I'd pull the quote off the transcript from YouTube to show you what Christine Amanpour, excuse me, uh, what she said about this. This is a lady who's very familiar with that area and very familiar with what's going on in the world today. I mean, she's a very astute reporter, one of the few I've seen out there I like. Uh, Here's her statement. She said they were talking about what was happening back in the 1980s versus, uh, I don't know, I think today, Hamas, etc. We're in correlations. Uh, and she said, history's not always a great teacher. And I thought that was a pretty cool statement. But it was the next one that got me. And she said, but the other thing is, leadership matters. And we are in a crisis of leadership around the world. I genuinely believe. You're talking about a very prominent reporter, and she's finding this astuteness and this whole process of uh, leadership and what it looks like around the world, around the world. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, well, uh, let me get those books off there. Well, here's what is going on. And I look and I go, Putin, Xi, Jun in North Korea, whoever that guy is that runs, I can't even pronounce his name, Iran. It's a theocracy, though. It's a dictatorship theocracy, is what it amounts to. Uh, then you have the heads of all of the Middle Eastern countries are all male. The Venezuelan guy is a male. Most of the Central American countries, where all the immigrants are fleeing from the travesty that's going on down there, are males. Uh, and what is happening is all of this is centered around a leader, not large groups of people. A leader. That that's a lot of countries in this world, and they're not the only ones, but there's some others too. You could go to Africa and Yemen and a bunch of other places and find similar kinds of things. In the United States, we're in an uproar. My God, we got a whole party that is totally disrupted. These are our leaders. We elected them to lead us, and they're fighting amongst themselves. It, it's like they can't. They can't define what their role is really up there, and it's about power, and it's about all of the things that we say when we look at a corporation. We don't want to work in that environment. That's too toxic. Well, guess what? They don't either. They're leaving. They're leaving before their elected term. These people who elected these people into positions to lead them and represent them are quitting, and they're just getting out. They said, I've had enough. I can't take it. I'm not going to put up with it. And they're just leaving before their term ends. Before their term ends. Because they can't see their way through anything, because there is no leadership in place. And then they're being guided by somebody who is spending most of his time trying to delay trials. That's primarily what Trump is doing. That, and he can attend a couple of rallies, but there's no sense of direction. There's no leadership engaged there. There's a cultic behavior, but it's not really leadership, because people don't have. I'm a firm believer that people are so locked into that side of him that they don't have firm control of their what they think they want to do. They're what we call unduly influenced, I guess would be a way. Uh, Not their faults. I've been in one of those cults. I was in one of those cults for a long time. It was a church cult, and I figured out how to get out of it, and I was glad I did. But I totally understand where those people are. And one thing I will tell you, just as a side note, um, you can't convince them by judging them. That they're tuned in and trained to ignore and deny that. Uh, that's why you see all of these guys going around making fun of them while they do a video conference with somebody, and they catch them. They're so tied up. They can't think through a common discussion scenario, and they get tongue tied, and they can't respond correctly. And 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 so what they say is, we're done with the interview, or no, you're wrong, and that's the end of it. And that's probably one of the worst things we can be doing with those people right now, because they're mostly neighbors. And this is one of the thing about leadership uh, that isn't going on well right now, that I think when we talk about it later, you'll find out when I talk about community and the role of leadership changing. Right now, it's about power. About power. It's about money. It's about control. Uh, those are the things that leadership is focused on right now, and it's one reason why I say it's fucked up, because it really is. I mean, I can't think of any other word that's more appropriate than that word to describe it. Uh, but that's kind of what I want to spend a little bit of time talking about. And so, how do I know this? Well, I just went through a whole list of scenarios that obviously you've seen. Now, and you may see it differently. You may see that behavior differently, and that's okay. I understand that. I don't agree with it, but I understand it, because facts are pretty hard uh, to discard. You can, but we, as rational people, as rational human beings, unless we're in that point where we're unduly influenced, and we're locked in, and that normally happens through isolation. And I see a lot of that going on in America today. People are isolating, and we're going to talk about how that plays out against how businesses are dealing with. How customers want to be serviced today, and that's a topic area I want to talk about a little bit later. So anyway, that isolation really locks you in, and it gets you to the point where you just don't want to hear the other person. And so, big thing about uh, leadership development now. If you look on any website, you look on any consulting firms, advertisements, or anything, that's we've got to have more emotional intelligence. I don't see it. I'm not seeing it happen. Okay. And so the question is, so what's going on here? What can we look at that can tell us? And that's what I've been looking at since I came out of retirement about well, I was in retirement about 15 years. And about 2015, I came out and I went, I'm going to see what's going on. There's got to be some pretty cool stuff. I mean, it's been a long time since I touched on leadership and high performance team management and organizational culture and all those things I dealt with. And I really enjoyed working with people that doing that. I'm going, they must really have some cool stuff out there. I'd like to go. So I started trying to read and catch up on something, and I couldn't find anything. I couldn't find anything that was new. I couldn't find anything that I hadn't already had back in 1972 when I came out of Special Forces and came into the business world. That's 50 years ago, folks. I haven't seen anything new. It's not really true. I have, but it's only been in the last year or so that I've noticed an uptick in a particular course that I think is valuable. And I'll touch on that later too. But, but generally speaking, you have employees, don't give a damn about companies. They don't care about the company. All they care about is whether they have the job that provides an income that allows them to survive. And that's tough to do given rents going up like, I don't know how many percent. It was a large percentage point compared to the normal inflation rate. Rent's eating people up. And so you have to live somewhere. You're either buying a home, which is hard to buy now because of interest rates, or the landlords, the major landlords are just jacking it up because they know they can. Same apartment, same stuff in it, same everything else, you know, 10% more every year. Really? For the same thing? What help me figure that out. What's going on here? Well, it's costing us more. Yeah, yeah, right. Uh, so I think what's happening is leadership, by definition, is floundering and trying to establish uh, a control, or not control, but the guidance, if you will, of people. Now, that's not everybody. There are some best practices companies out there doing a pretty good job at this stuff, but we can't name them. You know, I don't think you can name them. Uh, One of them is a children's hospital in I think it's Houston. Well, actually, out of the top 10 best companies to work for, five of them are children's hospitals. Now, can you name me the CEO of that hospital? Because, I mean, obviously they're doing something right, but we don't hear about them. Who we hear about? Zuckerberg, Musk, Trump. Oh God, Trump all the time. Uh, you hear about, you know, maybe uh, Tim, I can't think of his last name, who runs Apple. You might see him every now and then. And usually, when you do, it's because there's a product rollout. It's not for anything else. He stays pretty much below the radar. Or the guy who runs Berkshire Hathaway, the billionaire that does that guy, and always gives really good advice. Very low key. You don't know much. In fact, trying to remember the name tells you that, names that come to mind right away are Putin and Trump and Biden and Musk and Zuckerberg and Bezos and but if I said name the lady who is running General Motors, what's her name? You probably couldn't tell me. She's got a pretty good responsibility. She's doing a pretty good job up there, you know. You might be able to tell me the name of the governor of Michigan who has made some of the most significant changes in that state. And as a leader, she has what I call the trifecta of leadership. It's her, Gretchen Whitmer, Jocelyn Benson, the Secretary of State, and Dana Nessel, I think it's Nessel, as the General Attorney. Those three women ran in a heavily red based state, totally controlled by Republicans, won their seats, won re election, and turned and flipped the Congress from totally Republican to Democrat. Three women. Three women. But you probably, unless you've seen them on maybe CNN or somewhere, you might have noticed them and you might associate their face with Michigan if you saw it again, but you probably didn't know their name. You probably didn't know how they did it. I happened to live up there during that period of time, all that was going on. And it was pretty phenomenal following their campaign, following their communication message, following how they, all of them, they constantly went down to mingle with people and ask questions and and sometimes if something went wrong, they were there to sympathize with them and empathize with them. That basically turned that state. Their leadership turned that state. So there is an example of a Renaissance leadership group. They were thinking differently. They were doing things differently. They were managing things differently. They were not managing it from a control perspective. They were not managing it to put Democrats into control for a control purpose. They're basically really believed what they were saying, that they think they could make a difference. And by the way, if you go back and check on women's rights, they have a bill they presented that passed that now protects women's rights in Michigan. They put a tremendous amount of money into the school system in Michigan. They took that infrastructure bill and put it to work and laid down a tremendous amount of pavement. And trust me, that was a big thing in Michigan. So they did things quietly. It wasn't, hey, look at me, look what I'm doing, etc. People brought them on TV because Gretchen Whitmer, she was almost kidnapped. They had a kidnap plot against her, uh, and primarily that was it. Outside of she works on Biden's campaign, but outside of that, she's just in there with Jocelyn. And I guess the latest thing is finally parents are being held accountable if they, don't keep firearms out of the hands of their kids. The mothers and fathers. I was probably 15 miles away from that school, Oxford, Michigan, I think it is. Where that happened. It's just a devastating experience for people. Um, Dana Nessel pushed it. She pushed it to say, you have foreknowledge, you had capability, you have foresight to stop what you were doing, and you didn't. Then when we come to talk to you about it, you ran. You tried to escape. So it's probably as conviction as much on that as being in a non-responsive parent, but that's leadership. So I'm just trying to lay a base here for you. A tremendous amount of leadership is out there that can do things right, are doing things right, but there is much, much more of it out there that is floundering, that isn't. And I was surprised. I was shocked when I was looking at this and I started my literature research on it. I was finding it coming up constantly. I mean, you have people like Gallup and Pew and Harvard and DDI and uh, I don't know, a bunch of other research companies that actually go out and talk to employees and talk to people in business, et cetera, and they find out how things are going. And it wasn't looking good. I was looking for a lot of progress after being out of it for 15 years, and it was declining. And nobody is doing anything about it. Nobody's throwing up their hands saying, hey, what's causing this? How did we get here today? So I wanted to cover, and I'm going to use Gallup, and I'm going to use Gallup for a reason. They're really good at what they do. They seem to consolidate the data in reasonable terms that people can read, and it's organized and it's available to people. They don't mind sharing it, which a lot of people hoard that information, and they don't. They get it out there. So I, I'm using a lot of their data that I've picked up on and various articles, various research projects they've done on leadership, just to kind of uh, make some points here, and then help guide us through understanding uh, what I think probably went wrong, and what I think we're going to have to do to probably change it. Okay. And this comes from 6 or 7 years of constant reading, constant research, notes. I must have talked with hundreds of people, maybe almost 1,000 or more, over the course of those years, casually in various environments, whether it's a restaurant or a lounge or an outside bar or park bench or wherever I got an opportunity to talk with somebody and ask them how they doing, what's going on in life, what do they think about things. And then in those informal side of communication, you have a continuum of the sort of informal communication to the intimate communication, and that's a continuum. On the informal side, we normally start with things like hi, your name, where you from, and it normally comes around to, well, what do you do for a living? And that's a good inroad for me as a person who spent 35 years in a leadership role and 15, or well, probably about 30 years in a leadership role, 15 consulting in that area. It's a natural tendency for me to be inquisitive and gather data. You get pretty good at that after a while, asking the right questions, and so it kind of comes up naturally, and you go, "Hey, so what have you done here in your lifetime, and what do you do for your job?" And sometimes they'll go, well, I did this and I did that, and then that leads me to ask, well, how's the company doing? You know, how are you doing? How do you feel about it? And I can ask those questions casually, without being intrusive, without appearing to collect information. But it was very clear to me. And I talked to several layers. For example, I lived in Brighton, Michigan. I talked to several people in Brighton, Michigan, who were out of the automotive industry, and then what we call secondary and tertiary industries. Those are people who make parts for cars, or they do research for cars, or anything associated with cars. A lot of those companies were around that area where I was, so they frequented the same restaurants, the same pub that I used to go to Sunday afternoon. And you get to know people, and they come in, and you can talk to. And when you do that kind of research, you pretty much are getting fairly honest information. And it was becoming consistent information between companies, between levels of positions these people held I talked to, between males or females, all of if you took all those variables and we're looking at them and sort of looked at them relative to my discussion, there was just a lot of consistency. And one of the consistent things was that there was just not a lot of trust and respect in leadership. So I'm going, okay, I'm hearing this, but is it true? So that's when I started doing a little deeper dive into the literature for people I knew in the past that I used and I was consulting. And when I was consulting or when I was a leader in a corporation, I used a lot of people like Gallup and DDI and Q and some other companies to McKinsey and others to provide information. Uh, and to do surveys and assessment. I've probably done assessments on tens of thousands of employees and probably a couple of thousand leaders or more in my career. So I kind of know how to look at their data and I trust their data. Uh, Most of it's pretty valid stuff. So here is one of the things I found on Gallup. Let me just pull this up. Uh, let's see if I've got this where I can roll it. Yeah, okay. This is a questionnaire on leadership and management, and employee trust and organizational leadership is the top level topic. And the question that they asked here was, or a statement, and you had to respond on the assessment was, I trust the leadership of this organization. Now, you would hope that there's a lot of people who trust the leadership in an organization. I mean, it is the essence of what holds organizations together. But take a look at this. There, if you're looking at this, it was below 20% of employees who agree that they trust leadership in the organization. Now, you've got to look at that from the other side. That means 80% of employees don't strongly trust their leadership. They're not totally committed to them. Now that can vary, on the Likert scale. It can vary from strongly agree to strongly disagree. So you have degrees within there, but I'm guessing those degrees still had a large percentage of employees, probably over 60 or 70% of employees, who did not have uh, even a moderate sense of trust in the organization. Now, this data might be here. You could look it up and go further and see if they have subsequent data relative to that. But it struck me that, my gosh, we're talking about the basic key core aspect of this a company's being is people's trust in their leadership. That's they look forward. You got to remember, as a leader, people look up to you. They're putting a lot of their life in your hands. Their home, their income, their children's schooling, all of that rests in your hands as a leader, and how well that company goes if I'm working for you. And if you let me down, I begin to be concerned. And so it becomes really difficult, but I can totally understand what's going on here. You're telling me that I'm important to your company because obviously, if we all unionized and walked out on the street today, we know what happens. We saw that with the movie industry. It basically shut down all the production of movies, and everybody's watching reruns for 6 months while that's going on. So they can't produce. They can't produce a movie. They can't shoot film. They can't do anything new. They can't even get a new idea out of a writer. So that's how valuable they are to the industry, but they don't perceive they're valued because they're not engaged. Uh, they're not involved with their leadership, and their perception of leadership of them being valued is low. And that's shown in a lot of data that's going on. So if that's happening, let me just scroll down here a minute and let me see if there. some other information you might. I'll leave these links in the description so you can find them. Here's one. I trust in the leadership of this organization. I trust the leadership of this organization. That's the one. I think that might be the same one we're doing. There's some others down here. Here's one where it says manager experiences based on Gallup's employee engagement, overall satisfaction, and intent to leave based on the survey items. So they took all these survey items and looked at them, and they could make some conclusions about those people who were engaged and those people who were not as engaged and the likelihood that they would pick up and leave. And this bottom graph right down here is this is the percent of people uh, that were engaged, actually really heavily engaged and with the company. And they wouldn't be looking for a job. They're engaged. This people up here were engaged, but not as much. So they're kind of fenced. So they're waiting to see. They're not going to maybe actively go out and look, but if something happens to come around, I got it. So that's 31% of their workforce. How about this one? These people are actively engaged. Their resumes are floating out there. They're looking at all kinds of LinkedIn data. They're going everywhere trying to find someplace else other than where they are. 54%. 54% of the people in most companies are, on an average, are in that category. So I guess what I'm trying to tell you is there's some rationale for why people are not perceiving or not having don't have a positive perception of leadership, but we're not quite sure what it is yet. From this data we just know it's there. They don't have a positive perception of leadership, but one of those things is they don't trust leadership. So if we come down and say we really need you, you're doing a great job, and your performance rates are great. I'm going to give you 3% increase, and but you take it because you're doing okay. You're making a good salary, and you're making your house payments, you're making your bills, and you got a little extra to go on vacation, and things are going great. And they're telling you, we really appreciate you being here. They're saying all the words, and then they come in one day and they say, "We've got to lay you off." And even if you're not one of the people that get laid off, you got to be really concerned when 10% of the workforce is laid off, boom, just like that. No discussion, no sitting down with you saying, hey, look, we're struggling here to meet our financials and keep our equity up and the kinds of things we need to do to look good on the stock market and satisfy our shareholders. And we're struggling. We'd like to get everybody engaged and figuring out how we might find what we need from that standpoint to make our financials look better. And get a whole bunch of people together and start trying to figure out how they can save their jobs and still hit your goals and objectives. That would be a really cool thing to do. Never happens. Never happens. They don't want you to know because they have to do some things and they want you working as hard as you can work up to the very last second before they come into that office. So, well, first of all, leaders at the top level don't do that. They leave that to the guy who's in control of the person, or maybe human resources. It's a nice job for human resources. They're good with people. Let's go in and sit down and say, hey, you're gonna have a job. We can only give you 3 weeks severance, and we're sorry we're giving you short notice, but there's nothing we can do about it. We really understand how it's hitting you. You don't. until you sit down in front of that person and watch a grown man cry because he is having trouble thinking about how he's going to go home and tell his kids that they can't get certain things, they have to pull out certain things, that his wife has to go to work. Uh, we're going to have to hit the college savings account to stay alive. Until you sit down in front of somebody and do that, you don't know. And I'm telling you, the CEO doesn't do that. CEO, the C suite doesn't do it, and most of the vice presidents don't do it. They're not the ones that come down and make those calls. They're not the ones that sit in front of people. But they told you you were really needed, that you were valued. Many of them used to say, your greatest assets that we have is our people. Well, people aren't assets. Assets are things you appreciate and depreciate. You don't depreciate people. You don't even appreciate people, but you don't depreciate people. That's not a thing to do, you know. And but that's how it works, and it's not even on the same side of the balance sheet. Yeah. Before you were expense, now you're an asset. Well, how do you value? I mean, how do you, if I am an asset, then give me a little more money for the value I had. No, no, we don't mean it that way. So, no, people aren't assets, they're people. And that's the dilemma we're reaching here in America today. And the more we go down this path, the more we keep using the same leadership concepts. We keep instructing those. We just put different names on them and we repackage them. There's the same thing I heard back in 1972, which has led us to continue to do the same leadership, to create the same leadership that we've had for years and years and years, that keeps taking us down this path where employees don't feel valued, they're disengaged. And then the upper echelon starts looking for more power, more money, more control. And that division between the people who run this and the top, and then the top is looking at the middle management, the middle leadership. And by the way, I don't differentiate when I talk leadership. I don't differentiate between a CEO and a crew chief on a line. If they're trying to get people to achieve something, they're using the same leadership concepts, but that executive will go to a lot of training at Harvard, etc. That crew chief is going to get none of that. Uh, but uh, the the key here is that there's levels of decisions and splits, and we haven't been talking about how that's happening. How is the top thinking? How is the middle management thinking? How is the lower management thinking, the supervision level? How do they make their decisions? What are they sensing their roles and accountabilities are? Lots of differences in there that we very seldom talk about, very seldom spend any time doing. But we spend a lot of time and a lot of money on leadership development and training. Let me give you an example. Here you are. This is from Training Industry 2020, so it's fairly recent. Uh, 2010 to 2019, global investment in the training industry. Now, this is all training, not just leadership. Uh, if you want a comparative analysis, I'll give you one in a second. But if you look at 2010, we were like 275. Those are $1 billion on the left, folks. $275 billion annually on training. Wow. Okay, 5 years later, we're up to almost 350 billion. That's a large leap. That's 15 billion or maybe more, just, rounding things out. Then the next year, there's a 3 year gap. It doesn't go up as much, but it still goes up. Probably anywhere from $5 to $10 billion more than it was in 2015. 2018 to 2015. And in 2018 to 2019, it's staying pretty much the same, maybe a few $1 billion more, but it's consistently in the range of 300 plus $1 billion annually. That is that is a lot of money spent on training. Now I will tell you this: the I think in the last maybe it was 2018, 2019, something like that. Maybe it was 2020. Uh, a lot of data was indicating we're spending around $166 billion in the United States alone on leadership training. Leadership. We just discussed all this leadership, a lot of it, behavior based discussion where we've actually seen it going on. $166 billion in training our leaders. Yeah. Now, granted, these are high profile leaders we're looking at. It's not, and when we think about leadership, most of the time, if you out there talking with people, and they're not thinking about the small parts company, a small manufacturing company hired 50 people for one part on an electric car in Detroit. We don't tend to think about them when we're thinking about leadership and development of leadership. But yet, in the United States, 99% of all the businesses in the United States are small businesses like that. 1 to 50, 1 to 20 employees, maybe 1 to 100, and sprinkle in some middle-sized businesses. But they're small. They're small compared to Amazon or Google or Apple or Chase Manhattan Bank or some of these other conglomerates that are out there. So there are much fewer of them, and they actually hire out of the millions of people that are hired. They hire very few of those millions. Most of those millions are hired by the small businesses out there. But we don't talk about sending when we say $166 billion. What I don't have the data on, but I sure would like to see it, is the percentages spent on large corporations versus small businesses. If you're a small business owner and you're watching this right now on YouTube and you just haven't jumped on and made any nasty comments, good. Uh, but if you're watching this right now, it's interesting. I'd be interested. Have you had any leadership training? I was talking with somebody the other day. They had just finished a project with a company, and it was a fairly small company. And I think the question I would be asking is, how much leadership development can companies afford like that? If it's a restaurant, a Main Street restaurant, you had a good barbecue restaurant recipe, you opened up a one barbecue restaurant on Main Street in town, a small town, and it went off like crazy. And now you've got like a night shift manager and a chef and some cooks and maybe a supervisor, waitress and waiters, or maybe use your hostess to manage your waiters and waitresses. You might have two or three people like that, and your restaurant's picking up, and all of a sudden people in the next town would like that have been driving over would like you to be over in their town. And so you open the next restaurant. And the next thing you know, you have a chain of 5 or 6 restaurants. You have like 15 or 20 management. You have hundreds of employees. You never had leadership development in your life. And you're still trying to run those restaurants like you did that one restaurant, but you can't get your fingers in it enough. and you're beginning to feel the burnout hit you. That's what's going on. That's what's going on. A vast majority of many of these issues are employees down at the small business level, and where leadership development, probably the vast majority of that $166 billion is probably spent more on the upper echelon organizations with hundreds of employees or thousands of employees or even hundreds of thousands of employees, and the others. And I know I've worked for one of those multi-billion-dollar organizations. It was international, and I was in there consulting and part of well, pretty much running the corporate side of a transformation for the company. And yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the payroll of those consultants. It was in, on a week, and we were in there almost probably 3 years, and weekly, uh, some hefty salaries were going out to consultants. Now they weren't salaries, so they weren't on the ledger sheet as that. They were contract business, but the money was going out just the same. But I know for myself, it had to be close to tens of thousands, 10,000 or a little over a week, and I have 14 consultants on that project. Uh, so you think about this when it comes to leadership development. It's not evenly spread out across where the vast majority of people need it. That's one of the things. So consequently, when people step into roles and they get elected locally, and then they get pushed up to a state senator, then they get pushed up to a congressperson or a senator, uh, they haven't probably had a lot of leadership. I'm suspecting lawyers who run law offices don't have a lot of leadership and development training, but they are the vast majority of our Congress. Okay, we may go back and look at that. That might be a good research thing to look at. Uh, but so we have all that money going out. So I'm assuming we're getting some pretty strong results. But here's the second part of that financial study. This one Gallup was putting together, but this one happens to come from the Journal of Applied Psychology, and they were looking at transference of leadership development to the environment, back to the environment. So I sent these folks away, 10 people away for leadership development. Uh, we poll them when they come back and we say, have you changed anything about how you behave as a leader? And just a little under 3 people out of 10 would say, well, we have to say 3 people out of 10 would say, nah. Or I'm sorry, 3 people out of 10 would say, yeah, I did, I'm changing my behavior. It's better. Things are working better. The dilemma again here is when you look at data, you have to look at all sides of it. The other side of it is 70% of those people you sent, those 10, 7 of them are telling you they haven't changed their behavior at all. So then you're going, well, did you learn anything? Which really is saying, did you learn anything you didn't already know? Or did you learn something new you can use? Because you're telling me you didn't change your behavior, but surely you learned something new. Well, even of the people who learned something or changed their behaviors, the percentage drops as to whether that behavior change came from learning or not. There maybe 25% of them say now, or you could go down to 2 or go up to 3. Uh, yeah, I learned something new. I learned something new out of the program. Again, over 70%, seven of those employees would tell you, uh, no, I didn't learn anything new. I didn't learn anything, in fact, but you spent a lot of money sending them to that course. So, so surely something had to rub off on the ones that brought something back and did learn something, and even some of the others who may have, maybe they're going to try something. Certainly, the organization's going to be better off from that. The fact is, it's about the same as the learning. Only about 25% of the people said there's been some sort of benefit the organization gained out of them. 70% or more of the people who've been to training going, nah, nothing better for the organization. Well, how about you? How about your job performance? Yeah, have we got an increase? And did I see something happen better because of what you learned from the leadership? Are you doing something better? Well, obviously, if they weren't learning it too much, or the people who did learn it and the people who changed their behaviors and had some sense of impact on the outcome probably had some overall job performance, and that's what we see. But it's still declining even further. Your trend here is downward. Behaviors, learning, organizational outcome, job performance. Then we get to the real reason why we send leaders to leadership development to help them connect with the people that work for them so that they can deliver better product. They can deliver the product better. And that's the general perception of leadership development, the paradigm of leadership development, and the leadership role today. So, surely those employees are getting a lot of benefit that helps them go out and produce a product better, less costly, and they have better customer contact, all that stuff that you measure, those criterion variables you measure against what you learn. And lo and behold, that is a shocker right there. It's not going down to the people. They're there doesn't seem to be any subordinate outcomes coming, significant, even minuscule subordinate outcomes coming from leaders going through leadership development and training. So I'm painting a pretty dismal picture here, folks, and I hate to do that, but you kind of have to understand why I'm going there. Uh, I'm trying to give you some data that shows, and I have talked to more people who have come out of training and development that didn't receive, let's say they didn't receive coaching follow up. There wasn't a mentor there to guide them on what they learned to help them grow. That's one thing that's been missing through everything. You go to training, you come back, nobody comes in to work with you behind your training. I'm pretty sure that's a norm in most companies. Certainly, all the ones I saw was, and until they would call in somebody like myself to come in and actually spend time with leaders, and the company would pay for that because they were seeing. And actually, we were able to we ran some of these same kinds of surveys, went back and said, the stuff you're getting, you're sending these people this stuff, they're not coming back and doing anything with it. And we could point to them this using the same kind of data. We had similar kind of surveys and data, even you know almost 20 years ago. Now we still had that kind of information and data to help um, the organization see that there wasn't a connection between somebody learning or going to a leadership development program and coming back. It and then we were also able to show them how we could turn that around, and we did turn it around. And one of the things was that coaching element inside the organization, not external to the organization, not somebody you would contract with outside, consulting firm or someone off of LinkedIn. These were people who were in the organization, knew the organization, and made it happen well. So I didn't come in and serve as a coach. I was a consultant. I didn't come in and serve as a coach. What I did was help them design the system that allowed them to identify coaches they could use to help people learn and transfer what they learned down to the point where they were beginning to see impact from employees, other people around them. Consequently, the organization was seeing the impact, and they could tie a dollar value figure through various criteria like retention and improved efficiency in that department, improved sales in that department, whatever it might be. Okay. So I didn't go in and serve as a coach. I wasn't there to teach them leadership. What I was there was to help set up a system that allowed the people who knew that stuff well to work with somebody who didn't and be able to show them how to do it effectively, which was which by the way, they accepted far greater than if I would have tried to come in as a consultant and say, I've got 25 years or 30 years in executive leadership and I know about leadership. I can tell you the absolutely first thing that happens when you do that is you're full of shit. I don't, I have to sit here and listen to you, but it's a better way to put this from a communication professional point of view. I have to sit here and hear you, but I don't have to listen to you. I just let it go in one ear and out the other. That's the worst thing that can happen to you as a consultant is to be patronized and if you're not careful and you're not good at what you're doing, you won't see it, and then you're going to not have the results you need. But that was the one thing we did. And how did we do that? We sat down with all the employees of those leaders, and we said, how 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 would you how could we set something up where you guys might benefit from what your boss talks about? I says, well, so and for who in the department over there knows a lot about it, and we talked to them a lot. It wasn't his boss, but it was the other person that did in a separate, say, division of the company or something, but similar kind of area. And they used to go talk to him a lot. And where did they do that? Break room, or maybe drinks after hours at a bar that everybody goes to. Uh, that changed that whole dynamic. Changed the whole dynamic when we went in. We didn't do anything as experts for people. They were the experts. We simply presented a model or a different approach. And so we were helicoptering above all of this, seeing the little holes and the barriers that were getting in the way, and we as consultants would often sit around in the evenings and just brainstorm about all of this, and it would pop up, hey, we don't need to be doing this. We need to help them find the people who are trusted and can do this, and then help them and marry them up with folks so they become mentors, if you will, or coaches. But they were internal. They were internal. They were trusted. And it's one of the things that we've allowed slip away from us, uh, and consequently, the culture uh, has become more toxic because of that, because we're not working through it. We're not spending that time. We're sending people off for 3 or 4 day seminars, or we're putting them into a seminar process. And I'm not saying those aren't good. They got to get the knowledge, but that's where we stop. We don't put that into gear, so to speak. So there's plenty of room for education to be brought, but I would highly encourage people not to send folks out to it. Have it brought in. Have it brought in. Because people start looking at a 4 day leadership as a mini vacation that they go to. And I can tell you right now, the vast majority of programs I ever went to or saw or watched or audited didn't take time to work with that group of people about how they were going to transfer that back into their company. They delivered the keys. I'm going to teach you about empathy. Here's a video on empathy. I want you to do some role playing. I want you to do some more role playing. Any questions? Does anybody have any questions on empathy and what that is and what it looks like? No. Okay, well, great. You know about empathy. They go back and try to be empathetic, and that's not who they are. They never were that for the 10 years these people worked with them. So they go back and try to do that. And somebody just looks at them and says, "Are you freaking nuts? What's happened to you? That's not you. I can't believe you. I can't believe you really are empathetic. I mean, it doesn't sound like you at all." And it's because we spend no time teaching people that stuff. So this was one of the areas. So here's what happens. I think another piece of data here. Uh, oops. All right. Well, let me come back. So that one slipped out of my slide presentation. So uh, really what's happening is a culture. People have lost trust in leadership, and that has directly impacted their perception of the corporation's culture. And that because of that environment, because of that change and how that's going on right now, that points right back to the people who are out there actively looking for jobs on a continual basis. And also, they don't find a way to commit to the company. They don't have a sense of being valued. There's a lot of data out there that shows that you you are in fact um, not valued. You can't be valued because if you were valued, then they wouldn't be passing you off and getting rid of you when things got tough. They might sell some property or they might do some other thing. Uh, but but people become the easiest thing to deal with, at least from a senior leadership role. Not not the person and not the person who has to share the news with that person. Uh, they become really that's a hard thing to deal with within there. But the senior people aren't impacted by that much. They say they are. Oh, I really care. It hurts me to do this. Really? So how much did you reduce your bonus? Oh, none. Oh, I see. I see. So you didn't give up your bonus, but you're willing to give up my career. So, and that spreads like wildfire. That spreads like wildfire. So, I remember one organization I worked with had a they were divesting and we spent a lot of time with the CEO thinking through. First, we had to convince them that they weren't going to keep it a secret. By the way, this is never a secret in corporations. If there's anything that's a highly efficient and effective communication, it's a rumor. you, you're not keeping a divestiture away from people. You can't. You can't outsource everything you need to do to somebody who doesn't have some sort of contact inside that organization. So that you fool yourself in the beginning if you think you can do that. The best thing to do is come out to your people and get their input. And they don't they don't have to be the people who say you can't sell, okay, because that's not going to be their decision. But they can talk about how you can deal with that in a more empathetic and humane way. And that's what happened. It was kind of like we had some significant meetings with all kinds of employees gathering all kinds of ideas about okay, if we're gonna get, if everybody's, if this company's gonna dissolve, if it's gonna be bought up and be dissolved into another company, that might happen. That's one of the options. The other options is we just may shut the doors and go home. That's another option. And it became very clear as everybody talked about it, it's less likely that they were going to shut the doors. It was most likely going to be purchased, and employees would have opportunities to move. So, first thing we had to do is decide who can move and who couldn't move. Okay, who would move and who wouldn't move. And then we had to decide, okay, we have all of that. And by the way, again, this wasn't the consultants asking these questions. We had actual teams assigned that we put together to create these processes. And they went and worked with human resources on these processes. And they ended up talking to other companies in the same business, and they began because the divestiture and the sale was probably going to take 9 months or more. So they had 9 months or a little more than that, really, to decide how to place other people. In the meantime, we were looking at the board and other people to say, okay, we need to create a severance package for people who committed their whole life to this company. You know, you got people with 40 years in this company and they were about to retire. So that's one group of people. And then you have people just joined the company. So you can't treat them both the same. So we went through that whole thing. How do employees feel about all that? Would one feel cheated and the other not, etc. We went through all those dynamics with people. We kept the communication. We had a whole communication team set up, but we kept that all in the loop. We kept that all in the loop. The net effect is the vast majority of those people found other jobs the day they closed the door and said this is the last day. there, there wasn't a lot, we didn't have to waste a lot of time severancing, doing severance packages, etc. I mean, we had the severance packages there to handle them, but we didn't have to do a lot of after work with those people to find jobs. They already had them. They had been looking. We had been doing that for 9 months. So these people actually walked out of a company with a severance package in hand and walked across the street and went to work for another company. Or they were getting all their stuff in order and planning their move, and they had time to fly down or wherever they were going and or up and to find out where they would be being transferred and not lose anything out of the deal. And that included people who still had retirement down the road, that they saved some of those people who could go to work and then retire 2 or 3 or 4 years later. See, that's not how it normally happens. That's a rarity. That's a rarity. So the culture, if you want to know why people are frustrated with you, they 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 don't trust you. They're not engaged with you. They're not committed to you. They're one foot in the door and one foot looking for another job. It's that toxic culture you create by being inconsistent, by not being congruent, by not being compassionate. And basically, that tells employees you're not competent. So, why would they? Why would they be interested in helping you or trying to work through this and with you instead of fighting you the whole way through the process? And then having good things to say about a company after they've divested, a lot of these employees still hung together and they still talked about their experiences, and they're still in contact today. I think was everybody, did everybody get it? No, get treated probably fairly as they could. No, there were some who probably didn't. for one reason or the other, they were in circumstances we couldn't fit into those categories that allowed them to take advantage of things. And yeah, those people were pissed off. But the vast majority of those people ended up a little bit better off than normal. But that took planning. That took us working with a company who, had we not been in there with them, probably would have not taken that route. Probably would have not taken that route. So it's about who you are inside the organization, is what I'm trying to say to you. So I was reading something the other day that had to do. Let's see if I can pull this one up. Hopefully, yeah, there we go. Yay! I don't know why that other one got slipped out, but it was a matter of what I told you. It was about culture and trust and that. But here is a survey Gallup did about in what ways have customers' expectations changed since the start of the pandemic. I thought this was kind of interesting. Um, I was wondering kind of how they were focusing on this and what it made for them. There, I put another background behind me so you don't have to look at green. Uh, and and what there's when they were talking with employees and the themes reported among employees in terms of what they were seeing customers change was one of them was more demanding of and expecting higher levels of service. Now, keep in mind, if we go back, let's see, if we go back to this one, remember, look down there where it says subordinate outcomes. Subordinate outcomes. Okay, now let's come back here to this one. Okay, and so you got people who aren't really improving based on training and development from leadership. But after the pandemic, all of a sudden we've got an increase in the demand for excellence and high levels of service, high quality, and the expectations are greater for companies. And then you come in and you take a look at the next category, which is greater uh, expectations for all of that high quality service and everything being done virtually or online. They just, and it's interesting to me because what this says is during the pandemic, let's take a restaurant. During the pandemic, you would go into a restaurant and you kind of liked it. And if you didn't like it, you'd still go to it because it was convenient or whatever. Uh, when the pandemic hit, you weren't going to the restaurant. You were scared. But what they wanted you to do was deliver it to the house. But they wanted it to be the same as if you cooked it right in the kitchen in the house when it's delivered. So the expectations were of quality, an increase in quality and service, the speed of it and everything. It was growing. The demand was greater. And they particularly wanted you to be able to pick up the phone or get on, even get online. We created a whole online and deliver that food and deliver it quality wise, and because of that, we created a whole industry around this called the gig industry. Okay, kind of an offshoot of the Uber thing, but now it's food service. Those Uber drivers probably make more money off food service than they do hauling people around, and a lot safer too. So you have expectations get growing. You have a higher demand for the service, and that it be delivered without as much contact with other people virtually through the internet. And but they want it, you get online and you type something in saying, I want this order. That order goes directly to somebody who then has to book a driver to come get it. So they prepare the food, the driver comes gets it, gives it to the driver, they come to your door. The speed of that and the quality of that is important. I had just 2 days ago, no, yesterday, I guess it was, bought some food from Walmart. Okay. It was raining like crazy, and it just, okay, I'll have some food, So I got online. I picked out everything I wanted and shipped the order over and said I'd like it delivered between 3 and 4. And it came between 3 and 4, which is really good. So I met that expectation. And the driver put all this stuff down, and it was great. And so I started putting everything up. And all of a sudden I noticed some tilapia. That's like a $15 bag of frozen tilapia, and I'm going, I didn't order that. And then I noticed some chicken wings, boneless chicken wings. I like those, but I didn't order them. And some green beans or something like so. I'm guessing somewhere around 20, $25 worth of meat and other product that wasn't mine. So I called Walmart, and they're going, well, I said, I tried to reach the lady. I mean, I had her number at the top of my phone. I tried to text her and tell her she left it in case it was for another customer. She could come back and get it, and they'd be here waiting. I can't reach her. So I'm calling you. Can you please let her know? Because the Walmart is probably it's less than a mile and a half from me. Can't reach her. What? No, we have a deal. Once they leave, we can't contact them again. That's why we tell you you can bring the food back if you get charged for it. You can bring the food back and we'll refund your money. And I said, but then I have to make that trip, right? And they go, yeah, you do. So I'm going, okay. Uh, so these are the things that are going on in the world today. Things are not. I mean, I used to be if I wanted to get something from the grocery store, I'd get in the car and I'd go down to the grocery store, and I'd go grocery shopping. I'd pay my bill with that cashier, and if there was a problem with the cashier, I could go straight over and talk with the manager, and the manager would come over and talk with the cashier, and they settle it on the spot. Today, I'm sitting there going, okay, so what do I do about this food? And she goes, well, um, I got your order here. It's done. We're not going to charge you. It doesn't show on your order, so you're not going to be charged. I said, okay, well, I'll keep watching just in case. Because, see, right now I can't trust the business. I don't know. I mean, they can't reach the driver. They don't know for sure whether it's going to be billed or not billed, or I don't know if they're going to bill or not bill it until I see the final bill. All of this uncertainty comes from this desire to do things through the internet and virtually, but I want a higher quality of service. It doesn't ring clear. It doesn't seem to be happening. I had the same thing happen to me. I bought a vacuum cleaner. It broke. Part of it, piece of it broke. I need to get a new one. I've been working 3 weeks via email, and because I know what's happening, I didn't buy this from a reputable firm. Well, no, I'm not going to say that. I didn't buy the vacuum cleaner from somebody who is a vacuum cleaner sales group. Used to be, I mean, I have a vacuum cleaner. I Went in and I looked at some vacuum cleaners. A salesman came out, demonstrated it at the house, and we bought the vacuum cleaner for $850 35 or 40 years ago. I'm still have that vacuum cleaner and it's still working. And I could always go down to the parts store, get the part I needed for that vacuum cleaner. Today, you don't get that option because it came online, but it was 300, it was almost $400 cheaper than the first vacuum cleaner I got. Of course, it's handheld, battery powered, all that. It's really nice. It worked for a while. But this process I have to go through now to get this repaired, I had to go through someone who was a representative, a contract representative for the company who does the service processing for them. So I have to contact them. They then got back with me and said, we went back and forth about the part and all that. And I had to send them pictures and I had to send them the serial number and all that stuff. Sent that. All this is asynchronous communication via email. So I'll email and 3 days later I'll get a response. Then it's not quite correct and I have to correct it with another email. I have to wait 2 or 3 days on. And then it finally gets kind of corrected, but the process isn't complete until I have to do some other things. And it's been 3 weeks now to get this process and get the part paid. And all of it, I was dealing with different people. But I'm sitting here saying, I want that quality right now. I don't want to have to go through all this stuff. Why don't you have all that data on my? I mean, I have, I paid with this, and you sent me the product. You got the serial number and everything. Don't you have everything you need about what kind of part you need to get for this? So what I'm trying to say to you is this: this is what's coming in the next few decades. Not just about vacuum cleaners, not just about Walmart's food service, but about everything. Everything's going to a virtual world for the most part. The vast majority of it is now. I mean, you have whole brick and mortar companies that people used to love to go to and walk around and shop in that are history now because Amazon can deliver the product in a day. They have warehouses everywhere and they'll bring it to you in a day. And we like that. We like that. That's what's going on. But how do you lead that? How do you establish? How do you establish with your people who are handling this stuff that you never see? And frankly, they really don't even work for you. Like this lady in the Walmart is not a Walmart employee. They don't. She's a contractor. She drives as a contractor via Uber or somebody else, one of those gig companies. So they're contractors. And so if you've got 35,000 contractors around the country, how are you going to provide them what they need? Independent contractors as leaders, how are your leaders with Uber, for example, providing the drivers for Uber Eat what they need to meet these expectations I have on the screen right here? And we're spending billions of dollars in training, but it's not transferring down to that Uber Eats driver or any other thing that you have to manage. It's really not even transferring down if you're in the Amazon warehouse and you're a leader there. You're probably not even transferring it down there effectively if you went out and got training. Let alone the circumstances I just described, where you're not even dealing with your employees, you're dealing with contractors. So leadership is changed in such a dynamic way, but we're still using the same model we used in 1972 when I came on board, as if we were going to be, as if you were going to be an employee and you're working for me, and and I have access to you, and I have, certain amount of accountability and responsibility, and I how you perform will depend on how clear you are, how well we connect, all those kinds of things that we teach leadership skills about. So uh, we don't we don't end up trying to uh, create new or better systems. We just kind of accept what we got. And I think the problem with this is, and this is where I begin to notice this. I'm in a unique position. I've watched leadership since 1972. Okay, so I came out of the military as an officer. I went in as a manager to some extent, uh, uh, albeit base level. And I've been watching leadership and leadership development evolve over 50 years. So I've seen the trends. I've seen the trend. I've seen where when I first came on board, I was working for Electronic Data Systems in Ross Perot, who's well-known company, very well liked. Spent some time as a recruiter with them too, and uh, college campuses were always lined up with people to go to work for EDS because it was a company that was known, well known. If you worked for EDS and you left them and went somewhere else, people knew they were getting a well trained quality employee because those were the standards we had when we were hiring. Uh, but I mean, I remember I had a car. I didn't have to pay for gas to go to and from the office. I had an expense account for gas and meals when I was out on the road, for particularly, but not when I was local at home. But uh, there was money put aside to an account that I could use for college. They're going to pay for 100% of my college. Didn't need it, but left before I got a chance to use it, but it was there. If I could have gone back to school for 100% ride, 100% paid for. My health care was paid for 100%. And it was a great company to work for. We were doing good things. We were making improvement for clients and customers, and everything was going great. And and I liked it. Uh, got basically got stolen away by another company who offered a better deal. Which happens when you have good people. You're always going to be targeted. I know I was a recruiter working for Ross, and I did that. I targeted other companies and made it lucrative for them to come over to work for us. But as you go through this, you realize I mean, I've had a good reputation assigned to me for having worked for EDS for years and years after I left them. And so I was I was kind of excited to tell people I work for EDS. You don't have that much today. You don't have a lot of people saying, this is my company, I like it. Because there's been a change in how we value employees from the leadership role. The leadership role has changed to one of being more task related, focused on getting things done, getting productivity. And people go, oh, no, no, we're teaching people to be empathetic and everything. And I said, well, that's fine. But suppose you had a leader who was delivering a hell of a lot of product and increasing every month for the last 3 years and continuing to increase. But when you did your satisfaction surveys, that leader wasn't very well liked. And frankly, he's had a lot of turnover in the department. Are you going to fire the leader who's delivering all those sales and products for you because he's having a turnover problem? See, companies don't think in those terms, to be honest with you. They're going to take the money that sales is delivering, and if they have to trade out a few people, that's how they do it. But they're not equating to how much the overall cost of that is and the impact it's having. And they don't realize it until all of a sudden they hit a bump. And this is one of the things from a human resource perspective. The human resource companies don't do well. They don't foresee, they don't look out into the future a little bit and say, what would, just out of curiosity, what would happen if all of this blew up, and we had to do this? How would we do it? A lot of that planning doesn't tend to happen. So leadership, by definition, is always been tremendously focused on. I'm going to give you the skills that you need to connect with people so that they will feel comfortable in doing what you want them to do and to the level that you're telling them they need to do it. And your job is to get that connection and that trust and to make them feel valued, hang around long enough to deliver that product to us. But they don't tend to think about employees as humans and in a community, and the impact on the community as people leave or for whatever reason. We don't think of ourselves outside of our departments too much, particularly when it comes to budget time. You're siloed into you don't want to give up any of your money from that standpoint. So those become a major issue. Those become a major issue. And as you as you begin to look at leadership that's going forward, given what I'm trying to say here about where do we go from here? What kinds of things do we do? How do we change anything about leadership? Do we change any of the things we're teaching? Because I keep seeing the same things over and over, but I'm seeing that there has to be something different about how a leader thinks and behaves to cope with the idea that I'm expecting everything to be done without any contact with you, totally virtual, and I'm expecting a higher quality than if I were standing next to you where I could ask you questions. That that chart right there is really a flare going off. It's telling you things are not going to be the same. And you cannot expect leaders to lead people the same and achieve those kinds of criteria because it requires a different approach to it. It requires more thought process. It requires more creativity, more clairvoyance, more understanding, and then to get people to adapt to that environment. Think about that. Uh, how does a how does an Uber Eats driver feel about who they interact with Uber? Ask them sometime. I have. And I'm telling you, they're not getting personal contact. they're not getting virtually any contact. Everything is done again via email asynchronously, which means I'll send you an email 3 days later. You may respond if you happen to catch it in your email box. Then I got to come back to you and you come back to me and we go through that whole thing. And all this time, there are a lot of things missing out of that communication connection. I don't have any nonverbal connection with you at all. I have no idea how to sync who you are with how you feel and what's going on and what's happening and what you can do. I can't judge that because I can't see you. I can't watch you respond. And asynchronous communication is not going to give you what you need. 80% of what people tell you, the meaning you attach to that comes from your nonverbal communication, not the words you say. Not, so if that's true, we have a real problem coming up here in the near future we need to be looking at. So let me look and see. There's another area here. I'm trying to cut this down a little bit in time. Here is something that kind of where I can kind of relate the Renaissance thing for us here. Let me get my picture back here. Uh, so obviously something to do with every time I switch into a share screen mode. I have to figure that out. Sorry about that, but hey, that's part of what's happening right now. So, how many of you experience these kind of meetings? It's exciting. Everybody's clapping. We're happy. I don't. Most people are not experience those kind of meetings, but hopefully you do. Hopefully you do. But this is uh, when we look at these employees want and need to be recognized at work for what they do and who they are. Gallup and this organization, WorkHuman, have uncovered many ways in which recognition boosts employees' engagement, well-being, inclusion, and belongings at work. Okay, so we've got a training model here. We've got to boost employees' engagements, well-being, inclusion, and belonging at work. So, so you're a leader and you're put into this training program, hopefully the one that's clapping your hands, uh, and you're trying to discern, or basically, let me just read this sentence here because it's important. But to have these effects, the organization should ensure that their employees can be confident that recognition really means something. Recognition that is authentic is what really counts. All right, now here's the difference between uh, today's leadership development program and what I'm proposing in the Renaissance Leadership Odyssey. So you got to be authentic, and so how do you come across authentically to your people? First of all, let's suppose you haven't even met the employee. That's maybe you have 7 people on a remote team. You've never met them. How do you come across authentic? What's authentic mean to you? How do you know about authenticity in a person? Well, I am telling you now, we spent virtually no time over 40 years even thinking about how to help a leader understand that. But let's go down and see what they're saying we need to do. Now, these are recommendations out of this article, so let's not be too harsh on Gallup here. And you got to remember that I am uh, swimming an uphill battle with this. I might be one of the only one. Actually, I'm not the only one out there. There's a gentleman I think is I can't pronounce his name. I think it's Murgatory. He was up in Canada, and he and another gentleman actually have a master's degree program at a university up there. I found out the other day on Renaissance leadership, very much along the lines that I'm sharing with you right now. You know, the things we've been doing, we've kind of been dancing around and avoiding this. We're not uh, uh, thinking ahead and trying to think about innovative and creative ways to become, to help leaders become better at something like authenticity. Um, so, uh, so here it says these types of recognition backfire, undermining employees' trust and confidence in their workforce. Overall, 89, or wait a minute, overall, 8% of employees who contend with insincere recognition do not agree they get authentic recognition. I can still uh, I can still strongly, I think this is a statement, is I can still strongly agree that they are treated with respect at the work. So that's the question that's asked. When they ask that question, the answer is no. The answer is no. And so if your uh, authenticity is a matter of respect, how do you gain that? So authentic recognition reflects organizational culture. I always have fun with this so much because I spent so many years working and changing organizational culture. I always have so much fun when I go in and sit down with people. I go, okay, we're around a big round table. It's cool. Nice seeing you all. So lay out your culture for me. It gets awful quiet real quick. Most people particularly at that employee performance level we talked about, remember, the one that's not being affected so much by leadership training. These are the kinds of questions that people feel very uncomfortable when I ask them first. And then I have to say, don't worry, I don't expect you to know. Most people don't. They have no idea what the culture is of a company. It's because we don't spend much time talking about it. We don't spend much time working with it. It's not part of the dynamic of the business. It's just assumed that you're going to get it. So, and it says it signals the employees that words are trustworthy and have meaning, laying the foundation for organizational culture. What if you don't have any words? What if you're remote? What kind of words are you talking about? Are you talking about the words we have on the screen or the type of words we use in the computer? Um, how do I know? You know, and let's complicate this a little more. Suppose I'm going to type you up a memo, and my idea is to try to get you focused on the culture. And instead of writing the memo, I have AI do that for me. And it comes down to you, and you're going, you never asked, you never even mentioned this stuff before. Now all of a sudden, it's here in dynamic form in front of me on an email. Uh, you can't trick employees in to believe in your authentic. It doesn't work. If it's not you, they're going to see it so fast you can believe it. So again, here is the difference I'm trying to explain to people. We aren't teaching leaders how to be leaders. by first knowing who they themselves are. So I'll try to wrap this up a little bit and say if I were a Renaissance leader working somebody through a program today and I ran into this situation where I'm dealing with Uber drivers who are contractors, who I very seldom talk to. I hardly ever, I mean, probably never met most of them. But I want them to deliver high quality, because this is demand of customers today, high quality, on time, just the way I want it. And I want to be able to do that virtually without having to deal with anybody. In other words, I want to get online. I want to order it. I want that order to be right. I want it to be hot. I want it to be perfect when it hits the door. I do not want to see you at the door. I want you to lay it at my door and want you to leave. And I will open the door and I will pick it up and open it up and expect to have that perfect meal in front of me. And then it isn't. So this is the dynamic. So you want to be authentic because authenticity is important. The connecting with that Uber driver, because the customer then goes berserk. It's like online. I'm typing up thousands of the nastiest things I can say to you, and I ship it off to you, and I say I expect my money back, and fire that Uber driver. I can't. I don't know who delivered your food to you. Well, why can't you? Don't you have control of your business? I can hear it going on and on and on, and it's going to get worse as these demands get stronger. To be an authentic leader, you have to connect with your people. But to be an authentic leader, you first have to know about authenticity. You have to understand who you are from that perspective. What gets in the way of you being authentic? How do you cope with that? How can you correct that? How can you train your brain to change how you think? How can you know who you are so that you can then work with other people about how to be authentic and to have that. If you want to teach somebody about empathy, for example, you can do a course about empathy. You can teach them. I'm sure you can. I've read enough. I think lately over the last 6 months to a year on emotional intelligence. It's coming out of my ears. But I took the assessment, and guess what? I'm not very empathetic. But you know what? I'm less empathetic for myself, towards myself, than I am other people. I can see it and identify it in other people better. I'm not too good at doing it myself. And so, consequently, when I try to be empathetic, it often may come out the wrong way. And that's because I don't know myself well enough first. If I now think I am better at it than I was a year ago, because I've had to look at it and I've had to go and I've done most of this research on my own. But, but you can do that. You can make yourself, if you start looking internally first before you start trying to assimilate all these leadership things. So the focus on Renaissance leadership is a triad of power. It's starting with psychology, embracing sociology, and implementing and executing that with strong interpersonal communication competency. Those three things. Those three things are what I tell people you need to focus on if you want to develop leaders now. First, you start with, well, first of all, you, these are all intertwined, inextricably intertwined to the point where You can't uh, you can't uh, have one fail and the other two work okay. They're like I have a logo. I think here. Let me see if I can pull it up here. Yeah, there it is. I have a logo, and you notice the logo on the left. It's a set of gears. One is psychology, one is sociology, and one is interpersonal communication. Now, if one of those gears wears down and breaks, and it's a three-gear process, the other two gears don't work very well. So you have to master all three of these gears to be an effective leader in the future. It's a big ask of anybody, but it's absolutely important because you first have you have to learn about yourself, but you can't learn about yourself if you can't communicate effectively because yourself is all about you and how you relate to the external world. So you have to have that feedback. You have to be able to communicate to understand more about yourself. And when you do that, you have to have the, the proper emotional intelligence to encourage people to participate with you in that area. So if what I'm saying about the psychology side of thing, and I am specifically pointing right now at positive intelligence by Shirzad Sermin's area, because that is a program that's already there, ready to go. Uh, you can step in it tomorrow. This is part of my, I guess, consulting model where I'm putting together the model, but I'm not putting together the components you need to do. You got to find you got to get those and you got to achieve them in each of them simultaneously at the same time. You need to be working. And think of it like a college course. Okay, you have a college course and you're going to be working on things that are improving who you are, almost like a therapy session. Uh, where you're going to self discover why you do what you do based on your history and how you arose and what your saboteurs are in your mind that keep you off center a little bit all the time, that if you could kind of correct those, it would line up and you would become better. You're going to have to understand a little more about how your mind works. We picked a lot of this up from Andrew Huberman's Lab podcast. Um, uh, Andrew has a really unique way of taking and talking about the mind and the body and the biology of it and the connection of it and how it works to help you become. Well, these are the things you need to understand. When we talk about empathy, I don't want you to learn what words to say, what empathy sounds like, and what it looks like. I want you to learn empathy, what it is, the essence of it, to feel it, to understand it. To do that, you kind of have to understand you and how you and your mind and your brain and your body work before you start learning about empathy. And I learned from Andrew, for example, I thought this was a very good explanation. Your the purpose of your mind and your nervous system and your body is to take in information from the external world and define whether there is conflict between your internal self based on your mind, your system, and your body, and that existing external world. And then uh, align that. Align that so that it fits in a way that you can be most effective in your life. And I thought he has a great explanation where he says, He's standing in a grocery. It's like standing in a grocery store line, and you had a horrible day, and everything's gone wrong, and your body's tense, and your mind is always negative, and is focused on negative things right now. And the person in front of you is one of those people that are putting down one card after the other card and another card, and that card's no good, and they take another card out, and you're just exploding because time is seen differently that way because you're not aligned. You have a situation in front of you that is a normal state. It's slowed. It's evenly paced. They're doing their work, but you are just tight as taut rope. You just everything about you is going crazy, and you're frustrated. You're just wanting to push your cart and push them out of the way and get on about and do your business. You're misaligned with your environment. The same next day, you may go in and have had a great day, and you have the same person in front of you doing the same thing. And the tension subsides because you're at peace with yourself. You're calm, you're cool, you're collected. Your internal mind is not cluttered with a lot of negative thoughts and anger and frustration. Your body, your organs, your body, your system is reacting. You feel good, everything's working well. Before you were tight, you were tense, maybe even to the point of starting to sweat or something like that. Your body was reacting, and your mind and nervous systems were telling you, you know, what was going on with those things. You have to learn then to, there's ways we now know you can control that and you can stop it. You can stop right where you are. Stand there at that cart because you know you got 5 minutes or so. Stand there at that cart. Close your eyes, focus on your hands on the cart. Just feel the hands on the cart. Don't do anything else. Focus on your breathing. Breathe in, breathe out. Keep your hand on the cart. Do that for the 5 minutes you're waiting on this person. And when you walk up to the cashier, you're not going to rip their head off for taking the time to help that lady walk through having to buy food stamps, having to do something else, having not enough money to buy it, and having to switch cards, and all those kinds of things that you should be empathetic about. But you can't be anything empathetic if you're in that mood. Okay. And oftentimes that's what's happening. People need empathy a lot of times when you're pressed, when you're stressed at work, when things are not going right. They're needing empathy, but you don't know how to deliver empathy that way. Maybe you're not an empathetic person. You need to understand what that really means internally and who you are as a person first. Once you are able to do that and open yourself up, then when you're studying empathy or conflict or any other leadership skill you want to name, you're more competent in terms of being able to see it, recognize it, assimilate it into your information, into who you are. You understand that. It means you've taken it in, you understand it, and you can see the differences and what's going on with it. I tell people assimilating is like when you have you have a glass of water, it has properties. Put Alka Seltzer in that glass of water, it turns clear eventually, but it is a different product. It's much better, much stronger for you, particularly if you have an upset stomach. So, this is what you do with your body when you first learn how to understand yourself, to become better at managing yourself. You then are more open to assimilating new information or different information that perhaps before you were not familiar with. See that information, internalize that information, and I mean internalize it, really understand it, really feel it, really know how it works and your mind and what goes on when that happens. Then personalize that. In other words, be able to put it in your terms. So when you explain it, when you now go to the emotional intelligence side of the formula, you're going with a knowledge base much stronger knowledge base of who you are. So now you're taking empathy and you actually understand that you're not necessarily a real empathetic person. So you're having to put that to these people who have known you all these years. You're trying to work with them and put it in terms that they will see as congruent with who you are when you're empathetic. So you may be empathetic in one way, another manager may be more show empathy in a different way. And both of them have effective experiences showing empathy, just doing it differently because then it comes across as authenticity or authentic. And it comes across as sincere. That's what they're really saying. It's sincere. What you're saying and your body language and your behavior, the interpersonal communication, we call that the nonverbal behaviors. Some people they can show empathy by hugging. They can just hug you and just take all the negative energy out of you and immediately. And that's a close proximity. That's a very intimate proximity communication tool that some people have. Other people, they don't like to be touched. They can't get that hugging in. So you have to be authentic in your showing of empathy, but you still have to show it. You still have to understand it. So you have to correct in your mind those things that you need to do to be able to show it as if you, that leader, know what's going on. Okay. And this is the one thing we have missed all these years. And I think it's really screwed up leadership. We have spent virtually no time helping the leader understand who they are and what they're about. Sometimes if you spend the time developing that in a leader, you'll get down the road and they may look at you and say, you know, I'm the best salesman you ever had. I know you want me to be the leader. That's not who I am. That's not after all this development. That's not who I am. That's not what I'm about. I I I'll go back and be extremely happy making you successful as a salesperson. And maybe something else will come along like research or you know or innovation or something about sales or maybe I'm a good trainer, but maybe not a good leader. See, that's what this personal time about helping a leader can do. Now, why isn't that happening now? Because we outsourced all of that stuff. We took it out of the organization, we outsourced it, people monetized it. And when they monetized it, it was the program that they had that they want you to do, that they want to sell you, that becomes the important aspect about it, not how it interrelates and connects with the organization, the people in the organization, the community within the organization, etc. So we lose a lot of personal touch, a lot of important authenticity, if you will, by outsourcing leadership development, and consequently outsourcing leadership selection, sourcing, selecting, and placement also. All that needs to come in house again. And it needs to be done with these concepts in mind, taking the time to know the leader and the leader to know themselves first. While you're doing that, they have to learn how to communicate more effectively. You know, and I know people think they know how to communicate. They've been talking and they've been hearing since they were 2 years old. They're experts at it, right? And the answer is wrong. Uh, I doubt if most of you have had courses that pose to the question that if you think about this statement, the meaning of the message that you send is always in the mind of the receiver. It's a communication axiom. Now, what happens when you communicate with two people? How do you control that? Okay. Part of that's knowing who you are. The other part is understanding the communication principles behind that enough to do it effectively. All the methods for delivery, all the barriers that get in the way, how to compensate and overcome those barriers. That's why leaders used to tell me all the time, how's it going? Man, it's horrible. I sent these guys an email. I held a meeting with them. I told them exactly what I wanted to do, and it's just not getting done. It always comes back to the way it was told and the principles associated with trying to understand that getting them to understand what you want them to believe is important because it's how they view it and what they attach that meaning that you're sending will come from you and how you communicate it. And most of it will come from nonverbal. Most of the meaning will come from nonverbal. And if you send it through an email or on the phone or text message or whatever, don't expect don't expect people to line up with it all that easy. All right. Uh, so therein lies the difference. Bring bring leadership back in house. Do your leadership training in house if you're a company. Now, a lot of small business got to do that anyway. But if you're a major corporation, start bringing this back in house. Start bringing your selection process in house. Spend the time for leaders to understand themselves. Take that positive intelligence segment, make that work. Then combine that with Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence seminars and workshops. The combination of those two is about $1,500 a person, but they're dynamic because each of them have coaching associated with it. Then develop that coaching concept and all the skills inside the house so that when the leader comes away from this information, this training, the communication, the psychology and the sociology, the positive intelligence, the emotional intelligence, the impersonal communication, they come out of that training, we have trained people inside the system and a model that works with those people to deal with the everyday situational environments that happen in that company so that these people get a chance to make mistakes but learn as they go on effectively from somebody who's been there and done that. What you're going to find is they're going to come across more authentic. You're going to find the trust grows from that approach. It takes time, particularly if you've lost it. You got to rebuild it, but it can happen. You can build trust because you are authentic and you know yourself well enough to understand how to relate to other people more effectively. And you have the skill set, the interpersonal communication skill sets that we often don't teach people. Things like when there's more than one person involved, everything begins with interpersonal communication and it ends with interpersonal communication, just like I'm going to end this podcast with interpersonal communication, saying, I really want you to take a look at that book up there called Renaissance Leadership Odyssey. It's on my website, and my website's right here, I think. Oops, there we go. Yeah. It's called Buy Me a Coffee. I'll have the links all over the place, and you can look at it. I think it's over here in the post section. But if you're not a member, oh, we are a member. I did sign in. Good. Okay. So the book's over here, and it's a flip book. You can go in there and click it. And what is it, $5 a month? This is the kind of material that's going to be in there. You can go pick up and look at that, and that book just turn the pages, read the book, and you're going to learn a lot about this information. So uh, this podcast goes behind that membership program. I think I might leave this one on the public also because I normally don't something that's educational. I normally take and put behind the membership so people have it as a library. Well, what I'm trying to do with that membership is create a library, a digital library of this kind of information from experts in the field and from other people I talk to, uh, and so that you can get a sense of beginning to understand what you have to do to create the Renaissance leadership role you're going to need to assume in the future, and maybe instead of just reading about authenticity, you can really understand what it's like to be authentic. Hope you enjoyed this. If you didn't, it's okay. Don't tell me. I don't take critique well. So just just don't refer it. But if it made sense to you, if it's something you think you want to grab a hold of, it's a piece of art and work. I There's so much of this that can grow, that people can take and go locally and grow with, and I think that's where you need to do it the most. And as people get more local with things instead of trying to go real wide with everything to everybody, I think you're going to be much more effective developing leaders in the future. Most particularly if you can get engaged with an organization, embrace this concept, get people in the organization to buy into it with you, and then become someone who trains other people. What we will create are leaders that are not just focusing on getting their department and their objective achieved, but they will have commitments to uh, the whole company across departments. You're going to have employees and leaders talking to each other across departments about how they impact each other. Once you get that unity into place, your culture then starts building from that. And then that's where the strength of the culture evolves from, is when you're unified and everybody's linked in and where there's a okay, everybody's together and you're moving forward and people are building a culture and it feels good. And all of a sudden they're excited about it. They're excited about it. And by the way, they feel the value when they connect with other people. When you isolate them into an apartment, that's all everybody's focused on. There's no excitement about that. You can't belong to a company and do that. You you have to understand how you impact everybody else, how you can help them. So having what I call heterogeneous meetings with other departments where employees from one department and maybe one employee from each department all get together and work on this project. This project is one that doesn't stop at senior level or vice president level or even what they call leadership level. I call leadership. This program is designed to be pushed all the way down to the hour employee to help that hour employee get to know themselves well enough to be able to connect and understand their role and connect with their leader effectively. You have a very good day. If you want to know more, certainly you can find me on LinkedIn, direct message me on LinkedIn. And all my emails and all my contact points are in the description of the videos I do, so you can see those. This is a very powerful change. It's changing the whole concept of the role we expect out of leaders. It's changing how companies ought to rethink how they're doing business, not conducting business, doing business with their people. That's separate those two, folks. Your customers will benefit if you can conduct business within your organization effectively, because most people that are trained like this can adjust. You have a very good day. Thanks a lot for watching.